phone call that changed everything came on a Wednesday afternoon in late September. I was sitting in a hospital cafeteria in Asheville, North Carolina, trying to swallow a cup of coffee that tasted like burnt tires. My right hand was wrapped in gauze from where the surgeons had put 3 pins back into bones that used to know what to do. I'd been awake for maybe 4 days total in the past month. The rest had been morphine fog and tubes and the steady beeping of machines that kept track of whether I was still alive. My name is Calvin Mercer. I'm 68 years old. For 41 years, I made furniture by hand in a workshop behind my house in Black Mountain, just east of Asheville. Solid cherry dining tables. Walnut rocking chairs that lasted 3 generations. The kind of work people don't pay for anymore unless they understand what they're buying. My wife, Marlene, died of ovarian cancer in the spring of 2022, and after that, the workshop was the only place I felt like myself. Then, on August 23rd, a kid driving a delivery van crossed into my lane on Highway 70. He was looking at his phone. He told the police he didn't even see me. I spent 11 days in a coma, another 2 weeks learning how to use my legs again. The right hand was the worst part. Carpenters live in their hands. Without them, you're just an old man with opinions. The phone call was from my son-in-law, Brent Kazadi. He told me he was bringing my truck around to pick me up the next morning. The hospital was discharging me. My daughter Rebecca couldn't come herself, he said, because she was busy with the kids and with everything that's been going on. I didn't ask what that meant. I should have. The truck pulled up at 10 the next morning. Brent didn't get out. He sat behind the wheel of my own F-150 and waited for an orderly to wheel me through the automatic doors and load me up like a sack of mulch. He didn't say much on the drive, just kept the radio low on some sports station, drumming his fingers on the steering wheel like he was waiting to be somewhere else. We took the long way home. I didn't notice until we passed the second exit. I asked him why we weren't getting off at Black Mountain. "There's been a few changes, Cal," he said. He wouldn't look at me. "Becky'll explain it." I was too tired to fight. My leg was throbbing. My hand was throbbing. The pain meds were wearing off, and I just wanted to be in my own bed, with my old quilt that Marlene had made out of her grandmother's dresses, and I wanted Buddy, my black lab, to put his big stupid head on my knee like he always did. When we finally pulled into a driveway, it wasn't mine. It was a beige split level in some development outside of Hendersonville, the kind with a vinyl mailbox and a postage stamp lawn. There was a plastic kiddie pool tipped over by the garage. I knew the house. It belonged to Brent's mother, Loretta. I'd been there exactly once, for a Christmas dinner, that ended with her telling me my politics were going to send me to hell. "What are we doing here?" I asked. Brent finally looked at me. He had that face people make when they're about to deliver bad news they've been rehearsing. Soft eyes. Sad mouth. Total bullshit. "Cal, listen. The doctor said you're going to need a lot of help. Daily stuff. Bathing, meals, all that. The Black Mountain house with all those steps and the workshop and everything, it's just not realistic. Becky and I talked it over. We thought it'd be best if you stayed with Mama for a little bit while we figure things out. She's home all day. She can keep an eye on you. Where's my dog?" He blinked. He hadn't expected that to be my first question. "Buddy's at our place. He's fine. I want to go home, Brent. I know you do. But just give it a couple weeks. Let's get you settled." Loretta came out onto the front step then, wearing one of those long house coats with cats on it, holding a glass of iced tea. She gave me a smile that didn't have any warmth in it, the kind of smile people use when they are about to ask you for something. "Welcome, Calvin," she said. "We've got the back room all ready for you." The back room was a converted sun porch off the kitchen. The windows were single pane and rattled when the wind blew. There was a twin bed pushed against the wall, and a folding chair next to a TV tray. My suitcase was already there, shoved into a corner. So were 2 cardboard boxes with my name written on them in black marker. Just my name. Like I was being filed. I didn't have the strength to argue that night. I lay down on that twin bed and stared at the popcorn ceiling. My phone, I realized, wasn't in my pocket. I asked Loretta about it, and she said Brett had taken it to get the screen fixed because something had cracked in the accident. She said Becky would bring me a new one in a few days. She never did. For the first week, I was too weak to do much except sleep and try to walk to the bathroom without falling down. Loretta brought me food on a tray. Microwaved chicken patties, cup of soup, white bread sandwiches with American cheese. Marlene used to make me country ham biscuits every Sunday. I ate that food and tried not to cry. Becky came to visit on day 6. She brought a bag of clothes from my house and a plastic container of brownies she'd bought at Ingles. She wouldn't sit down. She stood in the doorway of that sun porch with her arms crossed like she was scared to come any closer. She was 39 years old. I had walked her down the aisle in a chapel outside of Boone 12 years ago. Ren's tuxedo had been too tight in the shoulders, and I remember thinking he looked like a sausage in a casing. But I kept my mouth shut because Becky was glowing. She was happy. Now she stood in front of me with that same pinched expression her mother used to get when she was about to lie to me about how much she'd spent at TJ Maxx. "Daddy, the doctor said you might have some confusion. Memory issues. We just want you to be safe." "I'm not confused, Becky. I want to go home. Black Mountain is too much for you right now." "Then take me there and let me decide that for myself." She didn't answer. She just kept looking at the floor. And then I noticed something. She was wearing a watch I'd never seen before. A nice one. Gold. The kind of thing Brett didn't make selling commercial insurance in Arden. "Becky, where'd you get that watch?" She covered it with her other hand, fast, like a kid caught with a cookie. "Daddy, please. Just rest. We'll talk about everything when you're stronger." She left. I lay there in the dark that night and I started doing math. The math was bad. It took me 11 days to get hold of a phone. Loretta locked her cell in her bedroom at night. Brent visited maybe twice a week, and he kept his in his back pocket. I couldn't walk fast enough to chase anyone down even if I'd wanted to. The cordless landline in the kitchen had been unplugged at some point. I noticed that on day 3. The man who saved my life was named Deshaun Pruitt. He was 22 years old, doing in-home physical therapy 3 times a week through the Medicare program. The first time he came, Loretta sat in on the whole session with her arms folded, watching us like a guard at a prison visit. The second time, the same, but the third time her sister called from Greenville with some emergency, and Loretta stepped out into the driveway to take it. Deshaun was helping me do leg lifts on the bed. He was a soft-spoken kid, built like a linebacker, studying for his doctorate in physical therapy at Western Carolina. He'd already noticed things. The fact that I jumped every time Loretta came in. The fact that I had no phone, no books, nothing. The way I'd asked him 3 times if he had the date right because I'd lost track. When Loretta walked outside, he stopped what he was doing. He looked at the door, then at me. "Mr. Mercer," he said, real quiet. "Are you okay here?" I almost broke. I'd been holding myself together with chewing gum and prayer for almost 2 weeks. "Deshaun," I said, "I need you to do something for me. I know you could lose your job, but I think my daughter and her in-laws are stealing from me. I haven't been able to make a phone call since I left the hospital. I don't know what's happening at my own house." He didn't react the way I expected. He didn't tell me I was confused. He didn't humor me. He just looked at me for a long second, and then he said, "My granddaddy went through something like this with my aunt. They had him in a place in Spartanburg, and he died there before we figured out what was going on." He pulled out his phone and handed it to me. "Make it fast." I dialed my lawyer, Hollis Whitaker, by heart. Hollis had drawn up Marlene's and my estate documents 12 years ago, when we set up our trust. He answered on the second ring. I told him where I was. I told him what I suspected. I told him I couldn't get to my own house and I didn't even know if Buddy was still alive. There was a long silence on the other end. Then Hollis said, "Calvin, Brent called me 3 weeks ago saying you'd suffered traumatic brain injury and would never recover. He asked me to send him copies of all your estate documents." "Did you send them?" "Of course not. I told him to send me a notarized power of attorney first. He never did. Calvin, I want you to listen to me carefully. Don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. I'm calling the Henderson County Sheriff's Office, and we're getting you out of there today." I handed the phone back to Deshaun, and I started to shake. He squeezed my shoulder. "Hold on, Mr. Mercer. The cavalry's coming." Loretta walked back in about 30 seconds later, her face still flushed from the call with her sister. She looked at us suspiciously. Deshaun was already back to counting reps like nothing had happened. He was a better actor than I'd given him credit for. "How we're doing in here?" she asked. "He's a tough one, Mrs. Casati," Deshaun said, smiling. "Stronger every visit." She didn't smile back. 2 hours later, a Henderson County deputy pulled into the driveway with Hollis Whitaker right behind him in his old Volvo. I'd never been so glad to see a man in a tweed jacket in my life. Loretta tried to make a scene. She told the deputy I was a vulnerable adult and that her son and daughter-in-law had power of attorney, and she was just providing care at their request. The deputy asked to see the paperwork. She said it was at Brent's office. The deputy asked her to call Brent and have him send a photograph of it. Brent didn't answer his phone. Hollis stepped in then. He was 65 years old, with a head of white hair like a senator, and the slow voice of a man who has never lost an argument in his life. He explained, calmly, that no power of attorney existed because his client had been in a coma when it would have been signed, and that any document produced now would be void on its face. He explained that he was Calvin Mercer's attorney of record. He explained that Calvin Mercer was leaving with him today, as a competent adult, and that anyone who tried to stop him would be answering to the State Bureau of Investigation by the end of the week. I packed my own boxes. My right hand was useless, so Deshawn helped me. Loretta sat at the kitchen table and watched, smoking a cigarette inside her own house, which I'd never seen her do before. She was furious. She wasn't scared yet, but she was furious. That came later. I rode back to Asheville in Hollis's Volvo. He took me to his guest room above the garage of his house in Montfort. He had his housekeeper bring me a real meal that night, pot roast with carrots and mashed potatoes. I cried into that gravy like a child. The next morning, we drove out to Black Mountain to see what they'd done to my house. Hollis had gotten a court order before we left. He didn't tell me why we needed one. He said we'd find out when we got there. We didn't need it, as it turned out. Nobody was home. The locks had been changed on my front door, but Hollis had brought a locksmith. While the locksmith worked, I limped around the side of the house to check the workshop. The workshop door was open. Half my tools were gone. My grandfather's hand planes, the ones from 1908, the ones I'd promised Marlene I'd will to the woodworking program at the community college, gone. My bandsaw, gone. My table saw, gone. The pegboard where I kept my chisels was bare. I stood in the middle of that empty workshop, breathing in the smell of cherry dust and machine oil that hadn't quite faded yet, and I felt something I'd never felt before in my life. Not in Vietnam, not at Marlene's funeral. It was a cold thing. It sat down in my chest and it made itself at home. Inside the house was worse. They'd been living there. Brent and Becky and their 2 kids. There were Cheerios on the kitchen counter. Cartoons paused on the TV. My recliner was gone, replaced by a sectional in some color of gray that didn't belong in a mountain home. Marlene's quilt, the one from her grandmother's dresses, was crumpled in a pile by the back door like a rag. Her china, the Wedgwood she'd inherited from her mother, was missing from the hutch. In its place were paper plates. Up in our bedroom, Marlene's jewelry box was empty. Her engagement ring, her pearl earrings I'd given her for our 20th anniversary, the locket with our wedding photo inside it, all gone. I sat down on the edge of the bed where my wife had died, and I thought about my daughter. The little girl I'd taught to sand the board with the grain. The teenager I'd taken to look at colleges. The woman who'd called me Daddy her whole life and meant it. Until at some point, somewhere along the way, she'd stopped meaning it. Hollis came in and sat down next to me. "Cal," he said, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to stay calm." He'd pulled the records on my way over. While I was in the coma, Becky had taken out a power of attorney using a notary public who, it turned out, had her notary license suspended 6 months ago for filing fraudulent documents. With that POA, Becky had moved $147,000 from my checking account, drained my Roth IRA, a $238,000 hit before taxes and penalties, and tried but failed to transfer the deed to my house into her name. The deed transfer had been kicked back by the Buncombe County Register of Deeds because the property was held in the Mercer Family Revocable Trust, and she hadn't known how to forge that document. She had also taken out a $75,000 home equity line of credit using a forged signature. That money was already gone. Loretta had a new HVAC system. Brent had paid off 2 credit cards. They'd taken a long weekend in Charleston in early September while I was still in the ICU. I listened to all of this without saying anything. Then I asked Hollis one question. What about Buddy? Where's my dog? He didn't know. We called Brent's number from the kitchen phone, which they'd plugged back in. No answer. We called Becky's. No answer. I sat in my own kitchen, in my own house, surrounded by another family's mess, and I waited. They came home at 4:30. Brent's Tahoe pulled into the driveway. I heard the kids first, both of them under the age of 7 hollering about something. Then Becky's voice telling them to settle down. Then the front door opening. Buddy came in first, and when he saw me sitting at the kitchen table, he lost his mind. He was a 12-year-old dog with hip dysplasia, and he ran across that kitchen like a puppy and crashed into my legs. He was crying, that high whine he only made when he was overwhelmed. I bent down and put my forehead against his, and I told him I was sorry. I told him I'd never leave him again. Becky came in after the kids. She froze in the doorway with her purse still on her shoulder, the look on her face. I remember it as long as I live. She hadn't expected this. She thought I was at Loretta's, drugged and confused. She had not prepared a face for me sitting at her kitchen table. Our kitchen table. The table I'd built her when she went away to college. "Daddy," she said. Brent was right behind her. He saw me and his hand went to his pocket, like he was reaching for his phone. Then thought better it, then didn't know what to do with his hand at all. Hollis stood up. Mrs. Cassady. Mr. Cassady. My name is Hollis Whitaker. I represent Calvin Mercer. The two of you have until 5 o'clock this evening to remove yourselves and your belongings from this property. Anything you fail to remove will be inventoried and stored at your expense at a facility of Mr. Mercer's choosing. If you wish to discuss the criminal charges that will be filed against you next week, you may have your attorney contact me. Becky started to cry. Real tears. The kind I hadn't seen since she was 7 years old and lost her favorite stuffed rabbit at the state fair. Daddy, you don't understand. We had to. The kids were you took your mother's locket, I said. She stopped. You took your mother's locket and you sold it. Or your mother-in-law sold it. Either way, it's gone. The picture inside it, the one of your mama and me on our wedding day. You took that. You looked at it and you took it anyway. Daddy, please. You're going to leave my house now, Rebecca. You're going to take your husband and your children, and you're going to find somewhere else to sleep tonight. I don't care where. I don't care if it's Loretta's. I don't care if it's a Motel 6. I don't care. You are going to leave my house. I'd never spoken to her like that in my life. Not when she was a teenager. Not when she'd wrecked my truck at 16. Not ever. She left. Brent didn't say a word. He took the kids out to the car, and he drove them away, and I never spoke to him again, ever, in this lifetime. That was October 5th. The arrest came on October 19th. The investigation took 2 weeks because the Buncombe County District Attorney's Office wanted to make sure they had everything before they moved. Hollis worked with a forensic accountant named Yolanda Briggs, who had retired from the FBI's white-collar division and now did private work for elder fraud cases. Yolanda was a small black woman in her early 60s, with a steel-trap memory and reading glasses she wore on a chain around her neck. She walked through my financial records the way a mechanic walks through a sick engine. She found things I never would have found. Wire transfers to a flooring company that didn't exist, a check made out to cash for $12,000 that had been deposited into Loretta's account. Charges at jewelry stores in Charlotte where Marlene's pieces had been pawned, not sold, which meant some of them might still be recoverable. Then Yolanda found the thing that changed everything. 3 days before my accident, on August 20th, Brent had purchased a $750,000 life insurance policy on me. He'd forged my signature on the application. He'd paid the first premium with my own money, transferred from my checking account using online banking he'd set up without my knowledge. The policy had a 2-year contestability clause, which meant it wouldn't pay out for a death within 24 months. Brett didn't know that. He thought he was set up to collect $750,000 if I died from my injuries. That changed the charges. Insurance fraud, wire fraud, and because he'd forged my signature on a federal document related to my Roth IRA, federal wire fraud. The U.S. Attorney's Office got involved. Hollis sat with me at the kitchen table the night before the arrests, and he asked me what I wanted. What do you mean? I mean, Cal, we have some choices to make. Your daughter is a co-conspirator. The DA is willing to take her plea on a reduced count if she testifies against Brent and Loretta. She'd do 6 months county time and 10 years probation, or she can go to trial and face the full weight of it, which is somewhere between 5 and 12 years federal. I thought about it. I thought about it for a long time. I thought about the watch on her wrist. Let her plead, I said. She's the mother of 2 children. I'm not going to be the one who takes their mother away from them. But I want it on the record. I want it written down somewhere permanent that she did this. She doesn't get to pretend it didn't happen. She doesn't get to tell those grandchildren of mine that Grandpa just disappeared. She did this, and I want them to know it someday, when they're old enough. Hollis nodded. And the in-laws. Throw the book at them. He smiled, just a little. It's already in the air. The arrests happened on a Saturday morning. Brent at his office, with a U.S. Marshals walked him out in handcuffs in front of his co-workers. Loretta at her house, where the deputies found another $10,000 in cash in a coffee can in a freezer. Becky at home, where she came to the door holding our youngest grandson, and the deputy was kind enough to let her hand the baby to her sister-in-law before he cuffed her. I wasn't there for any of it. I sat in my workshop, the empty workshop, with Buddy at my feet, and I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt tired. The kind of tired that goes all the way down to the bone. The case took 8 months to resolve. Brent took a plea at the last minute and got 6.5 years federal, with no possibility of early release for good behavior, because the prosecutors made sure the judge knew about the life insurance policy. Loretta got 3 years state time for her role in the financial fraud and the false imprisonment. Becky got her 6 months in her probation, and she lost her teaching license, which I felt bad about for almost 20 minutes. The pawn shops in Charlotte still had 2 of Marlene's pieces, the pearl earrings and the locket. I drove down to get them myself. I paid the redemption fee out of my own pocket because I didn't want to wait for the restitution to come through. The locket was scratched up. The picture inside was faded, but it was still there. I closed Loretta's nursing service down. That's the part nobody asked me about, but I want to say it anyway. After Deshawn told his supervisor what had happened, the agency that had placed him, a regional outfit called Carolina Compass Home Health, did an internal review. They found 3 other elderly clients in Loretta's care who had been victims of similar arrangements. Loretta, it turned out, had been doing this for a while, working with families to house elderly relatives whose children had decided they were inconvenient. She got a cut. She had a system. 2 of those families had also stolen from their parents. One of those parents had died in Loretta's back bedroom in March of 2024 of pneumonia that nobody had bothered to treat. The U.S. Attorney's Office added charges. By the time the dust settled, Loretta was looking at 12 years. I made sure Deshawn got something out of all this. I put $50,000 into a trust for his doctoral program and his student loans. He tried to refuse it. He cried, actually. When I handed him the check at a diner in Nashville, he told me it was too much. I told him my granddaddy used to say that any debt you can pay back with money is a small debt. Some debts are bigger than that. He stopped arguing. I sold the house in Black Mountain in the spring. I couldn't live there anymore. Every door frame had a memory in it. Every window looked out on something I'd lost. The young couple who bought it had 2 kids and a beagle, and the wife cried when she saw the workshop. She told me her father had been a furniture maker in Pennsylvania. I gave her my grandfather's hand planes when we closed. Most of them had been recovered from a pawn shop in Hickory. I told her to use them. Tools want to be used. I bought a 35-foot Airstream, and I had a truck rebuilt to pull it. I put Buddy's bed in the back. I put Marlene's locket in a box on the dashboard. And I drove west. I'm writing this from a campground outside of Bryce Canyon, Utah. The light here is unlike anything I've ever seen. The rocks turn red at sunrise and gold at sunset, and there's a silence at night that makes you feel like the world is finally letting you breathe. Becky wrote me a letter last month. It came care of Hollis. She said she's been seeing a therapist. She said she understands now what she did, how bad it was, what it cost. She said she doesn't expect forgiveness. She said she just wanted me to know that the kids ask about me. The older one, my granddaughter, is 7 now. She remembers me. She remembers the rocking chair I made for her when she was born, She wants to know where I am. I haven't written back yet. I might, I don't know. What I've learned is this. Family is a thing you build, the same way you build a chair. You start with good materials. You measure twice. You glue what needs gluing, and you nail what needs nailing, and you sand it until it's smooth. But sometimes the wood is rotten on the inside, and you don't know it until the chair breaks. And when that happens, you don't keep sitting in it. You don't pretend. You stand up. You walk away. And maybe, someday, if you've got the strength and the time and the right pieces of wood, you build a new one. Buddy's snoring at my feet. The coffee's good this morning. The road's still out there. I'm okay. I've had a lot of time to think out here under these red rocks. About what happened. About why it happened. About the kind of man I was before, and the kind of man I had to become. The truth is, none of this came out of nowhere. I see that now. When Rebecca was 16 and wrecked my truck, and I covered for her with the insurance company, that was a small choice. When she was 26 and called me crying about credit card debt, and I paid it off without asking her to repay a dime, that was another small choice. When she met Brent and I saw the way his mother Loretta looked at our family like we were a meal to be eaten, and I said nothing because I didn't want to start a fight at Thanksgiving. That was another. Cause and effect doesn't always show up the next morning. Sometimes it waits 20 years. Sometimes it waits until you're lying in a hospital bed with tubes in your arms, and the people you raised decide you're worth more dead than alive. I'm not blaming myself for what they did. They made their own choices. But I'm not going to pretend I had nothing to do with the soil they grew in. The only thing that saved me was that, somewhere along the way, I'd done a few things right too. I'd kept Hollis Whitaker as my lawyer for 40 years instead of switching to whoever was cheapest. I'd put my house in a trust when Marlene and I were healthy and clear-headed, even though it felt like overkill at the time. I'd been kind enough to a stranger named Deshaun that, when the moment came, he was willing to risk his job for me. None of those things felt heroic when I did them. They felt like just being a regular person trying to be decent. But they're the things that brought the cavalry. Character compounds, the same way money does. You don't see it growing, and then one day you need it, and either it's there or it isn't. What I want to leave you with is this. Be honest with yourself about the people in your life, even when it costs you something to be honest. Don't let love make you blind, because blind love is just a fancy word for cowardice. Get your paperwork in order while your hands still work. Pick a lawyer you trust. Pick a doctor you trust. Pick one friend who will pick up the phone at 3 in the morning and ask no questions. Forgive when you can. Walk away when you must. And teach your children, while they're still young enough to listen, that nothing in this world, not money, not a house, not a comfortable life, is worth more than the person who gave it to you. I'm okay now. The road's good. Buddy's snoring. The coffee's hot. That's enough.